start off tonight with Oscar Larson, who's the director of AAG Meetings. So feel free to take it away, Oscar.
Thank you, Emily. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I've been getting a lot of value myself out of talking to people about this. So I wanted to offer myself as a resource if anyone is doing anything related to virtual meetings, but I'm also going to ask for some help. I made 3 slides because Emily told me to keep it at 5 minutes. So I'll show them to you right now. Okay, pretty simple. I'm going to talk about AAG and the future of virtual meetings. So that was the first one. How do I do this? There we go. Okay, so on March 11th, AAG announced that we were canceling our in-person meeting and pivoting to a virtual environment. We have typically 7,000 to 9,000 attendees and as many as 1,700 sessions at our meetings. And so with about 3.5 weeks left, I think we realized that it was an untenable situation to continue with the in-person meeting, and we stopped, which left us very little time to pivot to virtual. Fortunately, we had already been working on hosting some of our meeting in a hybrid virtual environment. So we had evaluated several options for doing that, but they didn't exactly translate. So between March 11th and April 5th, we worked really hard to figure out how to host the meeting virtually. And what we ended up with was a platform where we could run sessions in Zoom, GoToMeeting, BlueJeans, Skype, some others. AAG physically ran we ended up with about 160 sessions or so. I think AAG ran about 100 of them in our own Zoom platform, and then another 50 or so were run outside of AAG's platform. We offered our attendees the option to use their own. We had a virtual exhibit hall that allowed for people to visit with the exhibitors they were able to do to carry on, and it allowed us to give some recognition to sponsors. I would say one of the main things that we were not able to accomplish, but we did a little bit of, but that probably the key to successful virtual conferencing is some networking. And we accomplished this in a couple of ways. One was with some specific mentoring sessions where we had later career sort of well-recognized faculty offer their time up to early career faculty and students for some mentoring, some one-on-one or one-to-few mentoring sessions. And those are very well received. We also ran at least one virtual reception with a research group that was able to meet and discuss their research. And I'm sure other things happen in an ad hoc basis around this, but these were the only ones that we were able to do ourselves. And that will it informs how to move forward, at least informs me how to move forward. So the platform doesn't really matter. What matters is getting people together. One of the lessons is, whether or not to do a virtual meeting that is synchronous, where everyone's live together, or asynchronous. And I think I was expecting an asynchronous approach to be useful, but I think in practice it doesn't give the same excitement as a live event. I don't think people align with it as much. So it's really only good to do that if everyone who's involved in the session is excited about that, because you lose the serendipity of being able to pop into something that's actually happening. Because if you have people watch presentations ahead of time and then go and chat about them, if anyone shows up, it's like going to book club without reading the book. The other lesson that I think sticks out really well is, what makes, it forced me, an AAG, to analyze what makes the meeting. And so of course you have presentations of sessions, and you have an exhibit hall where people can talk to their book publishers, their journal publishers, the editors can get together, potential authors can talk about what to do next. And of course there's companies there that are hiring. It's a great place to do networking. We have to get some underwriting to run the meeting, so we need to give our sponsors a platform. But the key piece is networking. So we tried for the presentations every platform that's available pretty much, and of course we ended up with Zoom, and I think we'll be moving forward with Zoom. I find it to be the most powerful, easiest to use, and most stable platform that I've tried. And fortunately, it's not that expensive to run, so I think it's a good choice. But with the networking piece, how can you get people to have that face-to-face? And the key is forcing the interactions that you want to have happen at the meeting. For instance, at a conference, you have all these conversations that happen in the hallway between sessions, and there's sort of serendipity involved, or you're kind of a clever conference goer who knows who they're looking for and figures out where that person is and goes to meet them there. And so I think what we need to do is actually take those types of interactions and make them events in and of themselves on a broad scale, so that you have an opportunity to bump into people intentionally in that way. And one of the ways we did that was with the coffee withs. And I think going forward, we're looking at doing specific networking sessions around topics that anybody could organize. I mean, AAG is pretty organically organized, so people can somewhat discuss anything. And having more coffee with sessions that are mentoring based, and then having some virtual receptions that are less targeted, but also like more mingly, sort of like we're having here today. And with that sort of overview, it's probably maybe it all is very, very clear to me, but I would like to open up to questions and comments, and I'd really like to challenge anyone here to think of other ways we can network, because I'm actually seriously looking for the solution that someone has figured out so I can steal that idea. I think there's so many good ones. So and again, I'll offer myself as a resource. If you're planning something and you're stuck, I would be happy to talk to you about it. If you're not stuck and you just want to, pick my brain about something, happy to help. I am at your service. So.
Oscar, this is Lisa. I actually have two questions, if it's not too much. One is,
it's not too much.
What is the an actual virtual reception, if you could describe that a little bit? And then secondarily, can you say more about the exhibit space and how you guys handle exhibitors?
I can tell you about how I want to handle exhibitors. That would be my preference. I don't know that we hit that one out of the park this year, but we know going forward how to do it. With regard to a virtual reception, it would be, I just took some notes on this in a meeting today, so let me see if there's a good nugget here. It would be in the case that we used for the meeting, it was a research network about access to water, run by Wendy Jepson. And they just got together and they would have had this in person anyhow, right? They all do the research, but they're spread around in disparate parts. So they come to the annual meeting, see each other, present on the research, and then talk, and then mingle over drinks or, snacks. And so this was just recreating that space where they could talk about whatever in sort of an environment like we're sharing here today in this virtual environment. It's sort of focused, but it's not, there's no particular focus to the discussion. They didn't need a facilitator to sort of drive the talking, but they were just able to mingle sort of in a friendly way and in a natural way. Whereas I think, a focused discussion could be, use to come up with new research ideas. But I feel like there's a way to, in some ways, democratize the experience by bringing in tools from the like online teaching pedagogy that might help engage people who were not otherwise engaged. Some people are just nervous to speak up, and they might, even in a personal, like in a in-person setting, they might approach somebody, but if it was a big group, they would have trouble actually introducing themselves. But in this way, perhaps a facilitator could help call on people who have joined this in order to get everyone to have an opportunity to interact with whoever it is that they want to interact with. That's kind of muddy, but I think there's a lot of opportunity here. To answer your question about the exhibits, I don't think we need something, especially, well, at least for AAG, I don't think we need something as advanced as like a 3D exhibit hall where you can walk around a booth in sort of this avatar form. That's neat and interesting, but it's more of a nice to have as far as I'm concerned. What I think is important is being able to give exhibitors the ability to say what it is they're selling, what it is they're showcasing, and have people set up times where they can talk. And as people access the virtual exhibit hall and they're accessing those different vendors, they're giving their information to that exhibitor to let them know that they're interested in the product, and it can actually be a more practical lead generation for exhibitors. And I think the ability to set up meetings during that time could actually lead to more focused meetings that could occur, because you wouldn't be in a position of, as an exhibitor, you wouldn't be in a position of talking to somebody who is not interested in the product, but is just sort of browsing and worrying that you're missing the folks that are stopping by who actually do need to talk to you about something pressing that they want to buy, or they need to talk about something related to the journal. I think we can actually provide a more targeted and improved experience to exhibitors if we can do it right. And I think the ability to launch meetings and to set up meetings is key. And having it be an event is key, because everyone can take time to essentially, I mean, you know that you're going to be gone for 5 days, even if it's a virtual thing. If you're planning to attend something like this, probably 5 days is a lot for a virtual thing, but you see what I'm saying. If you're going to a meeting, you're there specifically to do meeting related stuff, and it's time taken out of your calendar, so you can use it that way.
So I'll actually jump in here. I am, just for clarification, not a mapper. I actually work in undergraduate admissions at American University. So one of my biggest problems that we've encountered with COVID is interacting with and engaging students like we used to, right? Because we can't do it in person anymore. So being able to capture somebody's attention for X amount of time on Zoom, especially when it comes to their age group, has been hugely difficult. So I really appreciate what you're saying about organizing these large conferences. And we've definitely, as far as my territory, I actually work in Maryland and Delaware for the most part, interacting with high school students, counselors, CBOs in that area there as well. So I've absolutely utilized the smaller group sessions, trying to make them more personal, like the breakout rooms and stuff. I love breakout rooms with smaller students, organizing things like I call office hours for people to come talk to me, ask questions, network in that sort of way as well. And then during, if I have larger presentations, using the polls and the survey stuff in the Zoom and everything. So that way, it's okay if they don't pay attention for the whole thing, but at least they're engaging a little bit while I'm trying to address my message as well. And then another nice part that I've used a lot, sorry, I have a dog, she's about to start barking. But another nice thing that I've used a lot is panels, student panels. So I could see how that could also translate to your organization as well, using different experts in the panel, engaging conversation that way.
Super, thank you.
Yeah, I had a question on platforms. So I actually did the AAG, and I sometimes use other platforms other than Zoom. So could you sort of speak to the perils and benefits of using different platforms for the same event?
Oh, for the same event? Well, I mean, for my needs, I would like to maintain the same platform going ahead so I can be sure of what we're offering and be sure of what we're packaging under AAG's branding. I think it worked well with the timeline that we had to open it up to others, and our vendor that we worked with was super helpful in allowing that to happen. But it was also a lot of manual entry. I can automate everything going forward, so all the meetings are automatically set up and recorded and uploaded. There are lots of platforms. What I've found is that a lot of them have different lagging issues or different I don't even know. They all work okay. I just haven't had one that works as well as Zoom has, or that is as intuitive, I think, is what I found. Just in all the ones I've tried. That's just my personal preference. Of course, if you're running your event and you want to use another one, I'm not to tell you not to. I think the virtual, it's platform agnostic. I just prefer Zoom at this point. And I'm open to having my mind changed. So if you have a better option, I'd be happy to look at it.
I've got a question on the Zoom preference. With what I've heard from like the community as far as the different platforms, that Zoom's the least secure. And I know with youth members, hi everyone, we had our first online session and we had a Zoom bomb on the session. We didn't think it would be a big deal, but we posted the link on our Twitter, which wasn't like an ideal situation. We shouldn't have done that. We don't do that anymore. But I was just wondering if you could speak to the security of Zoom.
I am not an expert in this. However, I have spoken to experts about this, so I thank you for your question. And I will give you my non-expert echo of expert advice, which is that Zoom has a very strong platform and they are like leading the pack here. So they're going to be the ones that get the most attention on everything related to security. But I guarantee you every single platform is going through the same type of issues, not necessarily with Zoom bombing or like Skype bombing, if you will, but with the same, they're all facing the same scrutiny of their security measures. And we also ran into a Zoom bombing issue at our meeting, but we now know how to fix that. This is in the midst of everyone going live with this stuff. We now know how to get around that. So I think we're less concerned about that. And I think, my impression of Zoom was that they were very responsive to all of the criticism as it happened, but they also had the hugest percentage of market share. So they were experiencing the most pressure on that. I mean, if you're a bad guy and you figure out that there's an easy way to look for Zoom meetings that are happening or virtual meetings that are happening to jump into, you're going to want to pick the one that's got the most going on so you can do the most damage. I would think, I think that contributes to the idea that Zoom isn't necessarily that secure. I think it probably is a lot more secure than it seems to be. And I'm sure there are other issues with, regard to how your data is kept and so forth. I'm not an expert in those areas, so I can't speak to them, but I'm always open to hearing the criticisms. I think it's important, but I do feel that they were listening at that time.
I'll also jump in on that too, just in terms of Zoom security, again, not an expert, but we've hosted now, this is our 4th GeoDC. We've never had a problem with Zoom bombing. And, as Oscar said at the annual meeting, we had, over 100 sessions running on Zoom, and there was like one instance, of the whole time. So I think the key with security and Zoom, if you're concerned, is to really lock down who you're giving the link to. For the AAG, our sessions, because you pay to go to the conference, you had to log into the system in order to see all the links in order to get into the sessions. And then obviously for GeoDC, we give the link just on the meetup page, and meetup has it set up so that you only see the link if you're RSVP'd to this particular event. And then of course never use your personal Zoom link, right? Use the auto-generated link. But I think they got a lot of there's a lot of racket at the beginning of all of this happening because Zoom was very popular and people didn't necessarily know the best way to use it and all of that. But realistically, I think I would say that AAG and GeoDC's experience with Zoom bombing has been almost none.
I had a question to follow up. I mean, is there a way to easily remove people when that happens? And sort of just kind of related, have you used Microsoft Teams? And just as a way of comparison, and just one thing I've noticed in terms of the difference is the persistent chat versus Zoom. You only get the chat when a person comes into the meeting. So if you come in late, then you miss anything that's shared before. But if you create a Teams environment, kind of basically like Slack, then you have that persistent chat and a recording, or you can set up these different channels where people could drop in and out of different topical areas as a way to do more like informal networking maybe, or through chatting, and you could just kind of set up a meeting on the fly or with people. So I wondered if that's something that you've thought about.
I have thought about that as it relates to our annual meeting. And so in the future, we're going to be implementing a different way of chatting than within the Zoom, sort of like a discussion forum about each session that is persistent, similar to like a Reddit where you can upvote the good questions. With regard to my experience with Microsoft Meetings, it's I just find it slightly more clunky than Zoom in terms of getting into and out of, and I don't know, it just seems like a little bit more of a resource hog. But
definitely is.
But it could be okay. I don't know. I can't remember what I had to do to set it up though. I feel like with Zoom, you might have an easier entrance if you don't already have it. Although we're all getting into this stuff, and I think it's okay to put that out ahead of time. But I suspect that Microsoft Teams would cost a bit more to run for a conference like mine. I haven't looked at their pricing model, but it sounds like it would be a more expensive product.
And just a couple other follow-up. One, I've been trying to test out Mentimeter, just so using these like live polling tools. I've used like Slido for other meetings that people set up, but kind of limited. But you can't do upvoting like Slido does with Mentimeter. But that might be another way. Like, what are these other interactive polling tools that do some live visualizations that could engage people? And another thing I found somewhat helpful when I was participating in a NASA meeting was they pre-recorded our panel session, which I thought was helpful. So that way we didn't have to worry about, the logistics of the, sharing a screen or whatever. But then during the actual time where the attendees would be listening, we could, instead of me worrying about, especially for the host to deal with the logistics, I could just actively listen to the presentation and provide resources in the chat. And so that was one thing I thought, oh, that's a kind of an interesting use rather than solely just having people watch pre-recorded videos and that's it, but rather use that as a way for the presenters to engage people, share resources, and have a live Q&A discussion.
Yeah, I do think that's a good way to do it. And I think for the people that choose to pre-record their stuff, they're going to get a lot out of that. If you can run your event with where everyone does that, I think it's a good move. I think the potential for having better presentation quality with pre-recorded sessions is pretty big.
Just don't forget to add closed captions to anything pre-recorded, which adds like a whole nother layer of work for people. But yeah, that's all.
A lot of it's automated. With Zoom, is that something that did you guys do that at AAG?
We did not, but we are looking into it for the future.
I know Teams live events, they do it live. It's pretty good and close. I've seen that with Google Meet. I tried that. We're for government, we're going to get it for regular Teams meetings. So that's a huge need for 508 compliance.
I have a general logistical question about sort of like virtual like coffee hours and networking events, things like that. Because like, again, like I feel like if you're not careful, a virtual meeting can become nothing but like, death by PowerPoint, so to speak. How do you schedule, like how do you make sure that you're able to fit in both like all of your scheduled like, poster and oral presentations in whatever format you're going to do, and then have some time also for people to like talk, I guess, offline, but but on Zoom, you know, essentially scheduling in that time to sort of like meet in the hallways where you wouldn't ordinarily have that.
So I don't know if I'm the best person to answer that question, because AAG is quite possibly the definition of, death by PowerPoint. We have at any given meeting like 6,000 presentations. So in a virtual environment, we'll probably have fewer going forward. But I think what we'll just contend with is scheduling these things that you want to do that are going to be competing with other things that you want to do. That's always going to be our model, because I don't think until we change the way we accept presentations, that'll be AAG's way. But I don't think that should discourage you from pursuing something different. I mean, we're kind of dealing with legacy of AAG in order to transition to virtual. But if you're creating something new, or if it's, you know, not quite as big of a thing to shift, then absolutely, I would say schedule that time specifically so that people can go to those things. I think it's a great idea. And I think probably as we look to 2021, we'll look at using the breaks to schedule these things as they would otherwise be.
All right, I think we're gonna have to shut that off here, but I definitely invite Oscar to share his contact information in the chat so that you guys can use him as a resource, or ask more questions and get in touch that way. But this is a really great discussion, so thanks everyone.
It is a good discussion. Thank you very much, Emily. I'll just say I'm going to post a few links to some of the resources that I've created in the chat, so feel free to peruse those and use them as much as you want, and feel free to reach out. I'm here to help anybody if I can be of help.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Oscar.